today is the No Kings protest. Yeah, so there's a lot of people gone to the protest. And really big audiences. I looked briefly online, and huge numbers of people. Also in Europe, yeah, in Paris and London, there were demonstrations. Okay, so today we are talking about dependent arising. Yeah, that was the request, to talk about realizing the profound view and specific dependent arising. So I'll read a little bit from the book and then give commentary, as we've done before. Okay, so the chapter starts on 199. I won't go through the whole chapter, just little bits of it. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so the chapter starts out actually with Nagarjuna's homage to his treatise on the middle way. Yeah, one of his big, very, very important works on emptiness. And it's there's a lot of meaning in it, but I'll just give a little bits, something about it. Because to unpack it would be, 5 volumes of something. Okay, so what His Holiness starts out the chapter saying, Nagarjuna commences the treatise on the middle way with the now famous homage that draws out the implication of dependent arising. It does this by praising the Buddha for teaching that whatever is dependently arisen does not inherently exist. Yeah? Now this is the opposite of how we look at things. We say the words, and we say everything's dependent arising and it's empty. But our usual ordinary view of how things are is they exist inherently, and they are also dependent arising, which is the view of the lower Buddhist schools. Okay, so here's the homage. We'll use this as our opening prayer today. I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of all teachers, who taught that that which is dependent arising is without ceasing, without arising, without discontinuation, without permanence, without coming, without going, without difference, without identity, and peaceful, free from conceptual fabrication. Everybody understand that? Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like if you just read this verse literally, it's like, what in the world is he talking about? And if it has to do with the nature of reality, it sounds like he's saying nothing exists, because there's no this and there's no that, kind of like how the Heart Sutra says that. So His Holiness gives some explanation here. And he says here, dependent arisings refer to all phenomena. That means impermanent and permanent ones. Okay. It refers to all phenomena because all of them come into existence dependently, be it by causal dependence, mutual dependence, or dependent designation. Okay, those are three, that's one way of describing dependent arising. There's multiple ways, that the chapter goes into. Dependent arisings are the basis that lacks having the inherent nature of ceasing, arising, discontinuation, permanence, coming, going, difference, and identity. Okay, so when all those long terms I just read, they are the descriptions, the qualities describing the basis, which is dependent arisings. Okay? So their emptiness of having such inherent characteristics is the object of the unpolluted wisdom of meditative equipoise. Okay, so meditative equipoise, the union of serenity and insight, here focused on, because it's an unpolluted wisdom, that means it's not polluted by ignorance or the seeds of ignorance. So it's a direct perception of emptiness. Yeah. Okay. So ceasing means disintegrating every moment. Yeah. Not like something arises. Yeah. And then, then it abides for however long, and then it ceases. Not like, okay, we're born, your birthday. Then you live for so many years. Yeah, that doesn't change. And then at the end, you cease. Yeah. No, just this first word, that things are ceasing, they're disintegrating every moment, means that nothing stays the same from one nanosecond to the next. Yeah. So we tend to think things, somebody built the table, now the table is permanent. It's the same, that's always here, right? Yeah, wrong. It's changing moment by moment. Okay, so ceasing is disintegrating every moment. Arising means becoming that thing, the coming into being of something. And that refers to the nature, the development and degeneration of things. Okay? So, because things are arising every second, and they are abiding every second, and they are ceasing every second, all at the same time. Those three happen at the same time. We don't think of them as happening in the same time. We think arising, then it just stays, then it ceases. All of a sudden. No. His Holiness likes to use the example of the sun. The sunrise, we think the sun rises, then, then it sets, and in between it just abides, and, But he always makes a point, from the time the sun rises to the time it sets, yeah, where it is in the sky, or maybe we should say where the planet is on its rotating axis, is not staying the same. It's different every moment. And it's only because you have that momentary difference that the sun goes from sunrise to sunset. Yeah. Okay, discontinuation means the annihilation of the previous continuum. Okay, so right now the continuum of this table exists. It's been existing for a few years. Yeah, discontinuation is, for example, if it burns, yeah, or it totally falls apart. So we can't really trace the continuation of the table. And permanence means continuation through time. So it's referring to time. In other words, for permanence is things do not change from moment to moment. Yeah. Coming means coming closer from a distant place. Yeah. That's also something changing, isn't it? Yeah. Going means going further away. So it's going to the destination place. Difference means diversity between objects. Things are not the same. And identity means the objects are the same. Okay. So I ask you, if we had two pink thermoses here, are they the same? Why not?
Because you could destroy one and the other would still exist.
But they look the same.
They're not made out of the same metal.
Yeah, they're not the same. Okay, so just because two things look alike, in regular language we say they're the same, but in, philosophical language, the thermos is only one with itself. It's only the same as itself. It's not the same as something that looks like it. Okay. Peaceful, wait a minute. His Holiness says, although these 8 characteristics exist conventionally, the wisdom directly knowing the ultimate truth cognizes their emptiness. Peaceful means free from conceptual fabrications, and that indicates that when dependent arising is perceived the way it actually exists, in other words, what is its ultimate nature, what's the result of analyzing its ultimate nature, all conceptualization has been stopped. When the ultimate truth is known as it really is, it is cognized without any conceptual thought that it is this and not that. So in the direct perception of emptiness, there's no thought, I am realizing emptiness. You don't go, oh good, now I got it. Direct realization of emptiness. This is fantastic. Let's see, can I hold on to it more? I got to tell all my friends now. Let's end this meditation session quickly. Okay, no, that is not going on in the mind, yeah. In fact, in the direct perception of emptiness, and this equipoise, there is no feeling of even a subject realizing an object. Yeah. Now, I don't know, have you ever spent any time thinking about what would it feel like that there's a very important realization, but in the realization from the person who's realizing it, there's no sense of subject, realizing emptiness, the object. What does it mean? What would that feel like? Because even all the time when we're looking around, isn't there a feeling of I'm here and the object is there? Even you're thinking about something, yeah. Oh, you close your eyes and it's a conceptual thing. Oh, there's a me here and I'm thinking about what I did yesterday. That's the object. Okay. What would it be like no subject and no object? Yeah. When I think about that, it's really puzzling because it's totally different than now. Okay, the rest of the treatise on the middle way unpacks the meaning of this homage. Many commentaries have been written on this in India, Tibet, and China. Nagarjuna was a great sage who possessed the profound eye of wisdom that sees profound reality, suchness as it is. Suchness and emptiness in the way we use those words are synonymous. In Chinese Buddhism, suchness and emptiness are not exactly the same. And similarly, I think in the Jokong view, I think they're different. Okay, with the intention of explaining the meaning of suchness, based on profound dependent arising, and with the hairs on his body standing on end, and his eyes filled with tears of devotion and faith in the Buddha, Nagarjuna places his palms together on the crown of his head and bows to the Buddha. Beautiful image, isn't it? We just open the book and say, yeah, what's new? But, imagine reading this with that kind of devotion and respect for the Buddha and for Nagarjuna. Okay. Nagarjuna's purpose for composing the treatise on the Middle Way is to help spiritual trainees to attain their ultimate aspiration of Buddhahood. May we too come to have the same faith in the three jewels, confidence that is based on deep understanding of the complementary nature of emptiness and dependent arising. This is our motivation for sharing the Dharma this afternoon, to have that kind of confidence which gives rise to this wisdom. Like Nagarjuna, may we too cultivate the sincere aspiration to lead sentient beings to full awakening through the teachings on suchness and dependent arising. I like the next sentence. His Holiness says, it is not easy to be Nagarjuna's student. Yeah. Have you ever started studying this text, the treatise on the Middle Way, the Karikas? My goodness, you can't just pick it up and oh yeah, I get this. It's quite something. Okay, it's not easy to be Nagarjuna's student. His profound and sophisticated writings have subtle implications. We need to think deeply about these teachings over time and use them as a tool to understand our mind and to correct its way of apprehending phenomena. So the purpose is not just to learn the material. Yeah, the purpose is to apply what we learn to our own mind, to our own life. Yeah, because this is the key that stops our samsara. Okay, we can tweak our samsara all we want, and it just keeps on going. Even generating renunciation, even generating bodhicitta, even attaining, these supernormal powers, super knowledges, then that doesn't get us out of samsara. So His Holiness continues, I encourage you to reflect on emptiness and dependent arising every day, implementing analytical meditation to probe their meaning deeply. By doing so, day by day, month by month, year by year, your understanding of and conviction in these teachings will increase, bringing immense benefit to yourself and others. So that's why we're here. Okay, now we're gonna skip, because people requested specifically about dependent arising, to page 205, where the heading is the threefold presentation of dependent arising. Of course, there's more than one threefold presentation of dependent arising, but that doesn't matter. They're all friends. Okay, our one presentation of dependent arising speaks of three levels of dependence: rising in dependence on causes and conditions, existing in dependence on its parts, and designated dependently by being imputed, by being merely imputed independence on its basis of basis of designation. Well, yeah, it's basis of education too. Yeah. Okay, so first His Holiness goes into dependence on causes and conditions, because this is the easiest kind of dependence to understand. Okay, so dependence on causes and conditions, causal dependence, is also called dependently arisen and refers to effects arising from causes, pertaining only to impermanent phenomena. Yeah, because permanent phenomena do not arise from causes and conditions. Pertaining only to impermanent phenomena, this type of dependence is commonly accepted by all Buddhist schools and traditions. So everybody says, yes, impermanent phenomena, products are produced by causes and conditions. They all say that. Okay, what comes after that, they have some disagreement on. Nevertheless, the Madhyamikas and lower systems see this type of dependent arising differently. The lower systems believe it indicates that truly existent effects arise from truly existent causes. Madhyamikas, on the other hand, assert that a cause and its effect, as well as the process of effects arising from causes, do not exist independently under their own power, but exist by mere designation. From them, a thing's dependence on causes and conditions proves its emptiness of true existence. So, the lower schools, Vibhasika, Sautantra, Chittamatra, all say that, yes, things arise dependently, but they do that within all of them being truly existent, all of them having their own essence. Because if they didn't have their own essence, how could they be what they are? If there wasn't something that made this a giraffe, well, it could be a rhinoceros or a hippopotamus. It could be, huh? If there's nothing in this, then the thermos and the water inside, couldn't be what they are. They, because you could call anything anything, and anything could be anything. Okay. And if this thermos had its own essence, it wouldn't depend on the material that makes it up. And it wouldn't depend on somebody having the idea of a thermos, somebody laying out the whole conceptual thing of a thermos, somebody building a thermos factory, somebody deciding on the colors, somebody getting the paint for the colors. There's so many different substances and people that the existence of this thermos, as people online can see the thermos, there's so many causes and conditions to make this. So how can it have its own essence? So, okay, that's okay talking about thermoses, Now, what about you? Do you feel like you exist only because the causes and conditions for you exist? No, we don't feel like I exist because there were causes and conditions. And if there weren't causes and conditions, I wouldn't exist. Why not? Because I am I. I am here. I set myself up. Nothing created me. Well, maybe you go into a theistic thing. Oh, well, God did, but, What's that all about? I am just I. There is something that is really me in here that is not dependent on causes and conditions. Because if it were, then it could disappear. And there's no way my feeling of I is going to disappear. I am here always, permanently. Okay. Yes, I know one day I'll die. Yeah, but that's only the body that dies. The real thing that's really me, that one is going to go on to the next life. Yeah, that's really me. Okay. So do you know who you were in your previous life? How do you know that? Do you have the feeling like I am really the same person as I was in my previous life? No. But I exist now and I came out of nowhere, not dependent on the previous life, not dependent on karma. Isn't that? I'm just here. That's the reality of it. Okay, so you can see just by our way of thinking, it doesn't make any sense at all. How can there be a real me that's here, that doesn't depend on anything, that depended on parents, that depended on a previous life? Yeah, but we know we depended on these things, yet we still feel the core thing that is me. Nothing created that. I am I. If that were true, why are we so afraid of getting hurt? If there's really that core thing that's really me, then why are we afraid of getting hurt? Okay, you see, just simple things. Our way of thinking doesn't make any sense. And yet, this is the way our everyday perception, the way it feels, especially about the self. Okay. So the lower systems believe that dependent arising indicates that truly existent effects arise from truly existent causes. Yeah? But that's when you ask, But when you look at, when you think about it, yes, the thermos arose from causes. But when you look at the thermos, do you think, this arose from causes? No, there's just a thermos on the table, in and of itself. Okay. So Madhyamikas, on the other hand, say that both the cause of the thermos, the causes of us, the sperm and egg of our parents, the effect are coming into being in this lifetime, and the whole process from that sperm and egg coming into being, everything there is dependent. None of it exists in and of itself, self-powered. Okay? Nothing exists that way. But that's how we feel it does. Yes, there were causes and conditions. Okay, causes and conditions. There was my mom and there was my dad. And they're both inherently existent. Yeah. If they're both inherently existent, then how did I arise from them? Yeah? Magic. But I didn't arise from them. The body did. But I continue on, always. Huh? Okay, so the way we think and the way things are do not agree. There's a big difference in the syllogisms asserted by the two parties. The lower schools say, consider impermanent things. They exist truly because they arise only dependently. Whereas Madhyamakas assert, consider impermanent things. They are empty of true existence because they arise only dependently. Totally contradictory reasons, yeah. So for the lower systems, to exist means to truly exist, and truly existent causes produce truly existent effects. The idea that dependence proves non-true existence sounds nonsensical and stupid to them, okay? Let me just skip that. So according to the lower systems, the seed and the sprout truly exist, in which case, if they truly existent things don't arise from causes and conditions. So it means that the seed and the sprout must exist at the same time, because both of them are inherently existent, yeah? So the sprout, somehow to be inherently existent, must have something inside the seed that is the sprout, yeah? So when you talk to the Samkhyas, the ancient Indian philosophical school, they say, and this is a New Age idea too, that there's one, inconceivable substance that gives out of which everything that exists arises. Yeah? So whatever exists started out in this, universal substance. Okay, so if I started out in universal substance, and so did the thermos, then before I was born, I existed in the universal substance, and the thermos existed there too. Okay, so cause and effect would have to exist at the same time. Okay, do they? No, because for the result, the effect to exist, the cause has to cease. But then we go, but if the cause ceases, how is it going to produce the effect? Because it ceased. And doesn't the cause produce the effect? If so, then the cause must exist when the effect exists, otherwise it can't produce it. Yeah? No? Oh, but listen to this argument. Okay, someone proposes a solution to this dilemma by saying that it's like two ends of a balance. A balance. The two ends of the balance exist simultaneously. And while one is going up, the other is going down. And when this one goes up, that one goes down. But they both exist at the same time. Okay? Yeah? What, the two parts of the balance don't exist at the same time? They do exist at the same time, don't they? Okay. So, yeah, when the seed is giving rise to the sprout, you have the seed is approaching, becoming the sprout, and the sprout is approaching being produced. So the seed and the sprout exist at the same time. Right? Listen. Okay. Well, His Holiness says, but this too is refuted because the seed and the sprout aren't like the two ends of a scale. Okay, but this is a very interesting argument, yeah, because, you know, when you were a kid, did you ever put like lima beans or other things in a jar with a paper towel and kept the paper towel moist and watched the lima beans sprout? Okay, a lot of you did that, okay. If you were deprived children and didn't do that, we'll show you how. Okay, so here's your lima bean, yeah. At what point does that lima bean become a sprout? At what point does it sprout? Yeah, can you identify the exact moment of demarcation between the seed and the sprout? You can't, can you? So it's got to be that while the seed is approaching, you know, this, how does he word it here? The seed is in the process of germinating. Yeah, the seed's in the process of germinating. Then the sprout is in the process of arising. Yeah, and there's something in that seed that makes it a sprout and not a giraffe. Right? Okay, you guys are from the lower school. But it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah? I mean, even you say, okay, you know, the seed's changing. But there's got to be something in the seed that makes it. You know, your lima bean seed has to have something in it that makes it a lima sprout. Is that what you call it, a lima sprout? Or, yeah, and I don't know. Okay. But there's got to be something in it that makes it that sprout. Yeah? So then you go, oh, the DNA. Yeah, the DNA in the lima bean is what makes it produce a lima bean sprout. Lima bean sprout, that's contradictory because a bean isn't a sprout. The lima sprout. Somebody look up lima beans and see what you call those. Okay. So there must be something in that lima bean that produced a lima bean sprout, which will give rise to more lima beans. They're not giving rise to chickpeas. They're not giving rise to squirrels. So there must be something. It must be the DNA. Yeah, the DNA inside that seed. Yeah. Is the DNA the lima bean? Why not? Are you sure the DNA isn't the lima bean? How would it be a lima bean if it didn't have lima bean DNA? Mm-hmm.
It's here. So, Venerable, the lima bean is dependent on the DNA to be a lima bean, but the DNA by itself can't be a lima bean, because if you just separated the DNA, you would have some kind of liquid in a tube or something, and there's no way you would call that a lima bean.
Okay. Then how would you have a lima bean without DNA?
You can't, Venerable.
So the lima bean and DMA the same thing?
No, Venerable.
You're sure? Yeah? Other people? Yeah? I mean, I think scientists would say, I mean, the DNA is what makes that a lima bean. Yeah?
It's a unique characteristic of the lima bean, but it's not the lima bean.
It's not the lima bean. Then how do you know you have a lima bean if you don't have lima bean DNA?
It's got certain unique characteristics, like a specific DNA sequence.
Then what? But still, okay.
And we
Those
agree
are
to call it a lima
characteristics,
bean.
but what is the lima bean? Okay, yeah. Because when you look at a lima bean, you say that is a lima bean. Yeah, you don't say, oh, that's a lima bean because it has lima bean DNA. Yeah, you look at it and there's something there that is the lima bean, inherently existent, according to your perception, isn't it? How do you think of it? Okay. So the seed and the sprout have to be existing at the same time. Okay, that's the remedy. Okay, well, His Holiness says this is refuted because it's not like two ends of a scale, yeah? The sprout is presently approaching arising in that it is in the process of being produced. It does not exist at this time, although it will exist soon. How can we say the sprout is presently approaching arising if the sprout doesn't exist? Doesn't the sprout have to exist to approach arising? Yeah, whenever there's an activity going on, so there has to be something doing it. Its approaching arising is imputed independence on the seed germinating during the assembly of all conditions conducive to its growth. The seed exists while it is ceasing. Are you sure? Yeah, when the seed is in the process of ceasing, isn't it becoming nothing? How can you say it exists? And if the sprout is in the process of arising, it doesn't exist because it's in the process of arising. So you see, nothing exists. Yeah? Okay. The seed exists while it is ceasing, but in the following moment it will not. But where's the line? Where's the line when the seed ceases and the sprout arises? Yeah, where is that line? And this is things that we quarrel about, what something is. Yeah, that line in the sand, is that Israel or is that Jordan? That sand that blows back and forth, who does it belong to? Where's the exact line between the US and Canada? Yeah, can you identify that line, whereby you go one molecule over it and you're in trouble with the law of that country if you do it without having the correct papers? Have you ever thought about that? Where is that border? So The seed exists while it is ceasing, but in the following moment it will not. The sprout does not exist while it is arising, but it will exist as soon as it has arisen. Well, if it doesn't exist while it's arising, how can it exist after it has arisen? Then that means it just came in out of nowhere? Okay, I'm defending the lower schools. Yeah. Yeah. It just must have come in out of nowhere because the result didn't exist at the time it was arising, but when it has arisen, it exists. So how did it exist if it wasn't there? What are we talking about? In short, because they sometimes talk about dependence, saying meeting, yeah? Meeting happens between the causes approaching cessation, okay? So here you have the cause. The cause is approaching a cessation, and the effect is approaching production, like two ends of the scale. So although the cause and effect do not exist simultaneously and do not actually meet, we speak of both of them as if they both existed at that moment. Yeah, the seed is ceasing, the sprout is arising. Yeah? So we're talking about the seed, even though it's going out of existence. And partway through that process of going out of existence, it doesn't look like a seed anymore. And if you looked at it, you wouldn't say there's the seed. But also the sprout, yeah, the sprout's arising at the same time the seed is ceasing. But where is that sprout? Yeah. This is an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. Yeah. There's a Zen koan. Yeah, what is your face before you were born? That's getting at the same point here. Yeah. What did your face look like before you were born? Okay. In short, the meeting happens between the cause approaching cessation, and the cause exists while it's approaching cessation. Now I'm going to be a Madhyamaka. Okay, and the effects approaching production, even though the effect does not exist at the time it's approaching production. We're still talking about it, even though it doesn't exist. Is that a conspiracy theory? Yeah? Okay. Although the cause and effect do not exist simultaneously and do not actually meet. Okay. So the Samkhya's say they do meet because they both exist at the same time. Yeah? And the lower schools say, well, they must meet. Yeah? The sprout that is in the process of arising is a future sprout that is imputed in dependence on its principal cause, the seed, when all the conditions for its arising have not yet assembled. Okay, does your future life exist? Your future life doesn't exist. Then why are you trying to create good karma to have a future life, a good future life? If your future life is non-existent.
So that it will exist.
So that it, yeah. But does your future life exist now? The future life doesn't exist now. But it is a future life. Yeah. Yeah, when you study the 3 times, we've done this a little bit before, yeah, that, yeah, the future life does exist, but it doesn't exist now. It exists as something that will come into existence when all of its causes and conditions have come together. So the future life exists, but it doesn't exist now. Because, where is it? Yeah, you can't say, well, it doesn't exist now. Yeah, then why? Then why are you trying to create good karma for a good future life? Yeah, if there's no future life, if you tell me that your future life doesn't exist now, then there's no future life. So why are you concerned with ethics? Yeah. So, this is, in one way you can say, oh, we're playing with words, but in another way it's really making us think, okay, our future life does exist, but it does not exist in the present, because it is a future life that will, what they say, attain its entity, okay? In other words, it will exist when all the causes and conditions come together. Don't you think? Yeah, do causes and conditions need to come together for your future life? Yeah? So does it exist now? It doesn't exist now, but the future life exists. Because if it isn't something we could talk about, if it's totally non-existent, then it could never arise. Okay, does your previous life, yeah, did you have a previous life? Yeah, did it exist? How do you know? Where is it? If it exists, where is it? It exists in the past. It doesn't exist now. But the fact that it existed in the past doesn't mean that it's totally non-existent. So existent and totally non-existent are a little bit different, okay? Yeah. Okay. So So a sprout is presently approaching arising in that it is in the process of being produced. It does not exist at this time. If it existed at this time, you could see it. If you could see it, it doesn't need to be produced because it's already there. Okay? Although it will exist soon. Its approaching arising is imputed, this is the key word, independence on the seed germinating due to the assembly of all conditions conducive to its growth. So you need the cause, and then you need all the conditions that will make the cause become the result. Yeah. The seed exists while it is ceasing, but in the following moment it will not. The sprout does not exist while it is arising, because if it already existed, you could see it. Then, yeah. But it will exist soon as it has arisen. So the sprout, when the seed is ceasing, the sprout doesn't exist. When the sprout exists, the seed has already ceased. It's a past seed. It's not a present seed. In short, the meeting happens because the causes approaching cessation and the effects approaching production although the cause and effect do not exist simultaneously and do not meet. The sprout that is in the process of arising is a future sprout that is imputed in dependence on its principal cause, the seed, when all the conditions for its arising have not yet assembled. Effects definitely arise from their causes. They arise dependently, not inherently. And when no analysis is made, arising is like a magician's illusion. Arising occurs, but we can't pinpoint it. What is the exact arising of a sprout from the seed? Yeah. Well, it's when you can identify it as a sprout. At what moment can you identify that as a sprout? Can we all agree on what moment? What moment were you born? Okay, you know, on the birth certificate it has hours and minutes. I don't know. Mine, I don't think it has seconds. I don't know. Maybe they have seconds now. But are you born at the time of conception? Or are you birth when you come out of the womb? Okay, at what moment, yeah, are you out of the room? When you're crowning? Yeah, when your head's out, but the rest of your body is inside your mom? Yeah? Yeah. At what point are you born? At what point are you considered a living birth and not something that is being born? Yeah, can you pinpoint that time? No. So when were you born? Do you say, oh, then I wasn't born? You can't pinpoint it. I wasn't born. I just appeared. Yeah. When you get a bill and you have to pay it within 30 days, when does 30 days end? When is the moment whereby you are going to be delayed? You know, you're late in paying your bill. This is what is very interesting about the election things. Yeah, because some people, i.e. Donnie, says that mail-in ballots should not be counted. But didn't somebody vote? When did they vote? Yeah, or when, I'd like to ask him, at what moment do you say, this is too late to be counted? You know, they must be there by, you know, whatever, you know, November 4th. So, at what point? You know, 1 minute, you know, before November 4th, if the ballot arises, then it can be counted. But 1 minute afterwards, it can't be counted. Be very interesting than people who, yeah, make a fuss about this. Okay. So when no analysis is made, arising is like a magician's illusion. Arising occurs, but we can't pinpoint when it occurs. You were born, but we can't pinpoint at the moment you were, the exact moment you were born. Ballots were mailed in. At what point, you know, were they mailed in? They need a postmark, yeah. But is that enough for them to be counted, or they have to arise at the collection center? I mean, you get into all these tangled things, yeah. Okay, so that's the first kind of dependence on causes and conditions. So there's actually a lot to think about there, yeah. because it really feels like somehow the result must have something in the cause. Otherwise, the two wouldn't be related. Okay, then the second kind of dependence is dependent on parts. So dependent on parts, often called dependent establishment, emphasizes that all phenomena exist in dependence on their parts. That's independence, 2 words, okay? Not independent, yeah. They attain their entity, yeah, that is, they come into being, or they attain their identity, all means the same thing. That is, they come into being in reliance on their parts, applying to all phenomena, both permanent and impermanent. Dependent establishment is broader than dependent on causes and conditions, which applies only to impermanent phenomena. Okay. So, let's use the clock. Does the clock depend on its parts? Okay. If I took the clock apart and had all the parts out here, what is the clock? If I disassembled everything, do you have a clock?
Arguably, yes.
What?
Arguably, yes.
Who? Arguila?
Arguably.
Arguably.
Yes, Venerable.
Arguably what?
You could say it's a clock that's been taken apart. You could still call it a clock. It just wouldn't.
You could
Tell you
call
the
it a
time.
clock, but if somebody sold you a clock that was taken apart, would you call that a clock? Would you say, I bought a clock? No, I bought a pile of pieces.
You can buy furniture from IKEA and it's not put together.
Yes. So are all the parts the furniture? Yeah, when you get a desk from IKEA, all the parts, yeah, you say, I got a desk from IKEA. You bring home a box. Is that box a desk? No, then why in the world are you saying I got a desk from IKEA? You're lying. You didn't get a desk. You got a box of parts. Well, you can make it into a desk. Well, wait a minute. Yeah. To make it into a desk, there must be a desk somewhere in the parts. Because otherwise, the desk would come out of nowhere. So which part is the desk? No part is the desk. Oh, then why are they selling you desks? You just got cheated. Yeah. Yeah. You got a bunch of parts. Yeah. This table has parts. Does it depend on parts? Where's the table in this? If it depends on its parts, it must be somewhere in its parts. Okay, let's pretend this is an IKEA table. It's not. You know, I take off the top, I take off the side, the front. Okay, are any of those the table? No. Then where's the table? Yeah, the clock is on the table, but we can't find the table and we can't find the clock. Yeah? This is great conspiracy theory, isn't it? Yeah? There's a clock on the table, but there's no table and there's no clock. Cuckoo! Lama Zopa phrases it a different way. He says, there's a clock on the table, but there's no clock in the in this thing. Yeah, there's a clock on the table, but there's no table in the table. Yeah. That, I think that I thought that was so clever, the way he said it, There's a clock on the table. Yes, conventionally speaking, there's a clock on the table. Okay. Yeah. Is there a clock in this thing? No. Is that speaking conventionally or ultimate? There we're talking about ultimately. Yeah, what's missing, the word's missing, there is no inherently existent clock in this. There's no clock at all in this, but it is merely imputed on the basis of the parts being assembled in a certain way so that they perform the function of telling time. If you have all the parts assembled, yeah, but the clock can't tell you the right time, okay, yeah. So just having the parts alone doesn't mean that you can pinpoint we still say there's the clock. But if you start to do ultimate analysis, where exactly is the clock? Yeah. I used to do this when we had real flowers, and you take a flower, like a daisy, he loves me not, he loves me not. At what point, as you're plucking the petals off, does that cease to be a flower? And and when all the petals are there, there is a flower. Well, then what exactly is the flower? It should be somewhere in its parts. But when you take it apart and just have the parts, you don't have a flower. Okay? We call it a car parts store. Yeah? When you go to a car parts store, there's car parts. Are the car parts a car? Does the car exist at that time? If the car doesn't exist at that time, why are you calling it car parts? How can you call it car parts if there's no car? So doesn't the car have to be somewhere in its parts? Or somewhere in that universal substance? Or in the DNA? Doesn't there have to be something that is the car? Otherwise, what are you paying for? Okay. So the car parts are not the car, and the car is not the car parts. Yeah. Okay. But when the car exists, do the car parts also exist? Oh, that's interesting. The car parts are the cause of the car, aren't they? So then, you see, the cause does exist at the time of the result. Yeah, see, I told you so. Okay, let's continue on. So they attain their entity or their identity. That is, they come into being in reliance on their parts. In reliance on their parts does not mean that you can find the object in the parts. Okay. Applying to all phenomena, both permanent and impermanent, dependent establishment is broader than dependence on causes and conditions, because dependent establishment applies also to permanent phenomena. Conditioned phenomena have parts. An apple depends on its core, seeds, pulp, and skin. A school depends on classrooms, a playground, administrative buildings, an area where the students eat, and a lounge for the teachers. But there's no education department in the United States. It's been disbanded. How do we still have schools without an education department? Really? Who sets the standards? Oh, it's a free-for-all. Unconditioned phenomena, such as unconditioned space and emptiness, also depend on their parts. Since unconditioned space is just the absence of obstructibility and tangibility. Okay, so it's a negative phenomenon. It's the absence of obstructibility and tangibility. Because there is that kind of space, then things that do obstruct and are tangible can occupy that space. If there were no lack of obstruction and tangibility, then there would already be something in that space, and so this object couldn't occupy that space. Okay, so unconditioned phenomena such as space and emptiness also depend on their parts. Since unconditioned space pervades all material objects, and those objects have parts, the space pervading them also has parts that are conceptually distinct. So there's the space occupied by the lid, the space occupied by the external part, this part, the space occupied by the bottom, okay, the space inside that's occupied by water. So thus, unconditioned space in general has many parts. Yeah, the space in the east, the space in the west, the space in the north, space in the south, and so forth. Similarly, emptiness pervades all phenomena, so the emptiness of the table, the emptiness of the person, and so on, which are conceptually distinct, yeah, are parts of emptiness in general. Okay. The emptiness apprehended today and the emptiness apprehended tomorrow, which are also conceptually distinct, are also parts of emptiness in general. Okay. Applying to both permanent and impermanent phenomena, dependent arising in terms of dependence on parts, is accepted only by Madhyamikas. Svatantrikas favor using this level of dependence as the reason to prove emptiness. Aryadeva also liked this reasoning. So that was the second kind of dependence. Yeah. Are you getting confused? I hope so. Yeah. If you're getting confused, it means you're thinking about it. Yeah, it means I've been successful. Okay, the third kind of dependence is dependent designation by mere imputation. So dependent designation is also called dependent imputation. It indicates that all phenomena exist as mere imputations designated by conceptuality in dependence on their basis of designation. Wait a minute. I have a basis of designation here, all the parts of the thermos. Yeah. All the parts of the thermos, or let's use the clock. It's easier to think of clock parts. We have a clock here. All the parts are assembled in a certain way. None of the parts are the clock. But this is saying when you put all the parts together in a certain way, yeah, a clock comes into existence and just because I label it clock. And that before anybody gave it the name clock, it wasn't a clock. Was this a clock before anybody called it a clock? No, it wasn't a clock. Then how did a clock come into existence?
The parts came together and we called it a clock.
Oh, well, then it depends on somebody calling it a clock. So is the word clock this thing? But it's just, this exists because we call it clock. Nothing changed about it from its side from the moment before we called it clock until we do call it clock. So isn't clock just a word? And there's not really a clock here? Or are you going to say that it's a clock just because I call it a clock? Well, then I can call it a gopher. Yeah? And then it becomes a gopher, because then I could attach any name to it. Why not? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we all know that cancer is, or let's use AIDS, okay? AIDS is a disease that is new in the medical manual, isn't it? Yeah, for 100 years ago, yeah, nobody talked about AIDS. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know what HIV was, did they? Yeah, did people die of AIDS 100 years ago? Yeah, similarly, cancer, yeah, 100 years ago, I don't know, did anybody have the name cancer? Okay, then let's do 200 years ago. Yeah, was the name cancer around? Probably not. Yeah. Did people die of cancer 200 years ago? Yes. Did people die of AIDS 200 years ago? Probably. But 200 years ago, did anybody say, oh, my loved one died of cancer? No one said that. So how could they die of cancer if there was no cancer? Or you're going to tell me cancer is just a word? Then we could call cancer clock. Yeah. So think about it. Did people die of cancer 200 years ago? my mom had cancer, and they say sometimes cancer goes every other generation. Neither of her parents had cancer, but one of my mom's grandparents died young. So my mom started thinking maybe she had cancer that was genetic and it came from her grandmother. Okay. Did her grandmother die of cancer? Let's say, she had cancer. Yeah. Did she die of cancer? How did she die of cancer if cancer wasn't even known at that time? Okay. Did you exist in your mother's womb? Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about George. Okay. George existed in his mother's womb. But while that mom was pregnant, they hadn't decided on the name of the baby. So did George exist in his mother's womb? But at that time when she was pregnant, if you said, does George exist in your womb? She would go, what are you, there's no guy coming into my womb, There's a baby in my womb, but George, no. So when did George come into existence? Is George just a name? So when your mother gave birth, she just gave birth to a name? The labor is very easy, because it's just the name that gets born. Okay, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So dependent designation indicates that all phenomena exist as mere imputations. An imputation is a name. So is a phenomena a sound? Is this clock just a sound? It's the sound clock. It's the name clock. Designed by it's designated by conceptuality in dependence on their basis of designation. Without the conceptuality that designates phenomena, their existence could not occur. So that means giving something a name makes it exist. Nothing else is needed but giving it a name. That's all. Nothing else is needed, just the name. Then there's a flower. I gave the name. I said flower, so there must be a flower. Yeah, there's no basis of designation there. So you need the basis of designation and then conceptuality that gives it a name. Okay? But the object that is designated, is not the basis of designation. And the object designated is nowhere in any of its causes and conditions. And the object designated is not in the sound. So what is the object designated? What is the designated object? And whose designation? Who's doing the designation? Yeah? Zelensky looks at some dirt and calls it Ukraine. Putin looks at that same dirt and calls it Russia. Is it Russia or is it Ukraine? Let's fight a war to decide. Okay. So this level of dependence is accepted only by Prasangika Madhyamikas, and the unique meaning of dependent arising for the proponents of that system. So merely designated independence on the basis of designated. You need that term merely. It's not just designated on it. It's merely designated, because it could be designated and there could still be some essence in there. Because why is it called a clock? Because there's something in this compilation of things that's radiating, I am a clock. So we said, well, yeah, anybody who comes in the room looks at this, it's a clock. You can't call it a grapefruit. Yeah. Why not? Yeah. If there's no clock in this, can't we call it a grapefruit instead? Okay, are you seeing what we're getting at? You know, any way you look at it, in the causes and conditions, in the parts, in the designated term, in whose mind designated it anyway? We all call it a clock, but who designated it as clock? Can we isolate one person's designation, and that makes it what it is? Yeah. Like somebody must have, somebody must have come up with the name cancer. Yeah. So, but where's the cancer? Yeah. Despite being merely imputed, phenomena appear to us as if they had their own independent essence. They appear to exist objectively out there, in and of themselves. You know, they exist from the object side. It's already a clock. It's already a gong. And that object appears to me. That's how we think of it, isn't it? The object exists there, outside, independent of my mind or anybody else's mind. And yet, here, and what are you talking about? Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna say, no, it's just merely designated independence on the basis of designation. When you really get into this, it really makes you think. Because how can you talk of a basis of designation if there's no designated object? Yeah. But, so do they come into existence at the same time? Or does the basis exist first and then somebody comes along and gives it a name? And who's that person that gives it the name? Okay, so phenomena don't appear to be imputed by consciousness towards the object, yeah? When in fact they are. We impute, we give the name that way. We see the object as if it's already that object and that is coming towards us. but the imputation is going from the person to the object. Okay, it's as if we designated phenomena and then forgot that we designated them, and then instead believe that they exist objectively there on their own, waiting for our consciousness to come along and perceive them. Doesn't it seem like that? Yeah. After outlining the 3 levels of dependent arising in his middle treatise on the stages of the path to awakening, Tsongkhapa concludes, this is a quote, those are 2 presentations of the reasoning of dependent arising. The 2 presentations are dependence on cause and conditions and dependent designation by imputation. Here, dependent designation includes dependence on parts, which are the basis of designation, even though there's only 2 causes. Yeah? The causes, yeah? Yeah, it's interesting again here, yeah. Here, the dependent designation includes dependence on parts, which are the basis of designation. Independence on that basis of designation, yeah. So whenever you hear independence on, it means there's one thing that is the object and there's something else that isn't the object, but is dependent on it. Or that one's, either this one's dependent on that one or that one's dependent on this one. But they aren't the same. But the parts and the whole, the parts of the clock and the clock, depend on each other. But you can't find either of them when you analyze. When you don't analyze, it looks as if there's a clock inside of here radiating towards you. Hi, I'm a clock. Okay. In dependence on the basis of designation, an object is imputed by term and concept. For example, the aggregates, our body and mind, are the parts that form the basis of designation, and the person is imputed by term and concept in dependence on them. This indicates that both impermanent and permanent phenomena come into existence, attain their own identities in reliance on their parts, and dependent on being merely imputed in dependence on their basis of designation. Okay. Yeah. So it is, yeah. Things exist by being designated. Yeah. 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, nobody knew what in the world cancer was. Yeah. Yet, people died of it. Yeah. Does that mean cancer didn't exist then? Or does it mean that there was something that was radiating, hi, I'm cancer, but nobody saw it? Anyway, what is cancer? Yeah. Well, you have a definition, a bunch of, where's our nurses? They're not here. A bunch of out-of-control cells that are growing, yeah. But are any of those cells individually the disease? One of those cells isn't going to kill you. Okay, so this is really getting us to think, first of all, how do things exist? And second of all, how do I perceive them? Yeah, we perceive them as if they're coming from the object side. Yes, cancer existed 200 years ago. Yeah? But if you ask somebody who lived 200 years ago, where's cancer? They said, what are you talking about? I don't know. Nobody knows what that is. Okay. So does it exist before it is designated? Before, when we moved here, there was the house. It was Harold and Vicky's house. Yeah. When we bought it, then it became the Abbey. Is Harold and Vicky's house the Abbey? Yeah. When I first came up here, yes, there's Harold and Vicky's house. Yeah. Then we found, I put some ink on a piece of paper, and everybody else put ink on paper. I didn't give them anything. And then this thing over here started to be called Sravasti Abbey. Was it Sravasti Abbey when Harold and Vicky owned it? No. Is it Harold and Vicky's when the Abbey owned it? No. But what do you mean? You're saying Harold and Vicky's house, like that, turned into a monastery? Huh? Almost. Yeah. What makes it an abbey when we were at it? Was it that building? Yeah. Yeah. Was it one nun and two cats? Yeah. Was it Tracy? Yeah. Yeah. So think about it. Okay, we'll end. Okay, so this can go downstairs. So when I asked you in the middle of this, are you confused? And some of you were honest and said yes, and some of you said no. Yeah. I was, and when I said, if I've made you confused, I'm doing my job. This is because when I studied, this is how my teachers taught, and they got us completely confused. Yeah, so that at the end of class, we're like, yeah. And that's how we had to learn. Yeah, to learn, at least the philosophy, of conventional existence, ultimate existence, emptiness, dependent arising. And it also helps us think, what is when we talk about the object of negation, what in the world is it? Yeah. The object of negation doesn't exist. Why do you have to negate it? Because we believe it exists. Huh? So all our perceptions are distorted. Mm-hmm. We think we're perceiving reality, and we aren't. Does that mean that everything's just chaotic? No, things exist conventionally. How do they exist? By our creating our conceptual mind. Okay? Our conceptual mind. as a whole, you can't even point to anybody's mind. Yeah, but the conceptual mind created it. So it exists. Yeah. Otherwise, there's no clock on the table. But there is one. But the clock doesn't exist as it appears to us.